Welcome to your favorite channel, the channel where hidden truths are revealed and untold stories come alive. Today, we uncover one of the most shocking scandals ever to rock the world of 90 Day Fiancé. Jenny Slatin and Sumit Singh were once seen as living proof that love could conquer anything. Their relationship crossed age gaps, cultural barriers, and family opposition, inspiring millions of fans around the world. But behind the smiles, promises, and wedding vows, a devastating secret was slowly building. Sumit Singh had fallen into the grip of online gambling. What started as harmless bets quickly turned into a dangerous addiction. Over time, nearly $250,000 disappeared. As the debt became impossible to hide, Sumit began pressuring Jenny to pay it off, using her love and loyalty against her. Eventually, the truth came out. Lawsuits followed, and Sumit was sentenced to 6 months in prison. For Jenny, the emotional damage was overwhelming. Under constant pressure and betrayal, she made the most painful decision of her life and divorced the man she once believed was her soulmate. This expose takes you through every stage of their downfall, from fairy tale beginnings to tragic endings, and finally Jenny's attempt to rebuild her life with a new partner named Zach. Jenny Slatin and Sumit Singh's journey began like a modern romance story. Jenny, an American woman in her 60s, met Sumit, a younger man from India, through social media. What started as casual online chats soon grew into something deeper. Despite their age difference and cultural backgrounds, they connected through humor, warmth, and emotional support. When Jenny traveled to India for the first time, viewers of 90 Day Fiancé watched in fascination. Here was a woman leaving behind her comfortable life in California to chase love across the world. And here was Sumit, promising devotion despite strong opposition from his family and society. Their story became a symbol of hope for couples facing impossible odds. The cameras captured tender moments. Jenny learning Indian traditions, Sumit defending their relationship, and both of them dreaming of a future together. Fans admired Jenny's courage and Sumit's determination. Against all expectations, they seemed ready to prove that love really could conquer all. But even in those early days, warning signs were present. Sumit's family strongly disapproved, questioning Jenny's age and intentions. Financial problems lingered quietly in the background. Jenny, blinded by love, ignored the red flags and believed that patience and trust would solve everything. Their wedding felt like a victory. Jenny wore traditional attire. Sumit stood proudly beside her, and fans celebrated online. For a moment, it seemed like their fairy tale had finally come true. But beneath the smiles and vows, Sumit was hiding a dangerous secret. After marriage, reality set in quickly. Jenny had left behind her family, friends, and familiar life to live in India. Adapting was harder than she expected. Money was always tight. Sumit's job situation was unstable, and Jenny's savings slowly disappeared. Arguments about finances became frequent, though Jenny tried to convince herself this was normal. Sumit began spending long hours on his phone and computer, claiming he was working or talking to friends. Jenny noticed his growing distance. When she asked, he reassured her that everything was fine. But his anxious eyes told a different story. Family pressure made things worse. Sumit's relatives continued to criticize Jenny, making her feel isolated and unwanted. Bills went unpaid. Promises were broken. Sumit's mood shifted rapidly, loving one moment and withdrawn the next. Jenny knew something was wrong but couldn't fully understand what it was. Behind closed doors, Sumit was living a double life. While Jenny believed he was working late, he was deeply addicted to online gambling. What began as small bets turned into an obsession. Wins fueled his desire to keep playing, while losses pushed him further into desperation. Money vanished. Loans piled up. Credit cards were maxed out. Sumit convinced himself that one big win would fix everything, but instead, the losses grew worse. When Jenny discovered unexplained withdrawals and confronted him, arguments followed. He promised it was temporary and under control, but the truth was far different. By the time Jenny learned the full extent of the damage, nearly $250,000 was gone. It wasn't just money. It was their future, their trust, and their stability. The truth hit Jenny like a tidal wave. Sumit was drowning in debt, chased by creditors and legal trouble. The betrayal cut deeper than any cultural conflict they had faced before. Worst of all, Sumit pressured Jenny to pay off his debts, asking her to drain her savings and sacrifice everything she had left. This was the moment everything collapsed. Sumit refused to take full responsibility for his reckless choices. "We're in this together," he insisted, twisting the meaning of marriage into a weapon. Jenny, already exhausted from years of defending their love, now faced the unbearable weight of financial ruin. The creditors grew louder. Phone calls, letters, and threats flooded their lives. Jenny's nights became sleepless, haunted by the fear of losing everything she had worked for. Friends who once admired their love story now whispered in disbelief. How could Jenny, the woman who fought so hard for love, be dragged into such a nightmare? Desperate and trapped, Sumit continued to gamble, hoping for a miracle win. But miracles never came. Every attempt only pushed him deeper into debt. Every promise shattered Jenny's trust even more. The $250,000 debt was no longer just numbers on paper. It became the symbol of a marriage falling apart. As the debt grew heavier, Jenny found herself trapped in a nightmare she never imagined. What began as quiet financial trouble turned into a relentless storm. Instead of protecting her, Sumit tried to pull her down with him. Jenny had always been the backbone of their relationship. She left her family, her country, and her comfort to stand by Sumit. But instead of appreciation, she faced constant pressure to fix his mistakes. Sumit insisted that marriage meant sharing everything, even his reckless debt. "Jenny, you have to help me," he pleaded. "We can't survive unless you step in." At first, Jenny tried to reason with him. She reminded him that trust and honesty were the foundation of their marriage. But Sumit twisted her love into guilt. He reminded her of their vows, of standing together through good times and bad. To him, those vows meant Jenny should pay off his hidden debt. The pressure never stopped. Day after day, Sumit begged, argued, and manipulated. He urged Jenny to drain her savings, sell her jewelry, pull from her retirement, and even take out loans in her own name. Each demand wore her down, leaving her exhausted and emotionally broken. Friends began noticing the change. Once hopeful and strong, Jenny now looked drained. Her smile faded under constant stress. She confided in a few close friends, admitting she felt trapped. Still, she couldn't bring herself to reveal the full truth. Deep down, she still loved Sumit and held onto the hope that he would change. But the creditors showed no mercy. Their calls became more aggressive, their threats more frightening. Jenny's nights were filled with fear and anxiety. The fairy tale marriage had turned into a battlefield, and Jenny was caught in the middle. Then the storm she feared finally arrived. A lawsuit was filed against Sumit Singh. Months of pressure from creditors demanding repayment of nearly $250,000 had reached a breaking point. Sumit's excuses and delays no longer worked. The lenders wanted justice. The case went to court, exposing every detail of Sumit's gambling addiction. Jenny sat in the courtroom as the truth unfolded. Bank records, transaction histories, and creditor testimonies revealed the full damage. Sumit had gambled away their future, and now the law was stepping in. The trial drew public attention. Media outlets picked up the story. Fans of 90 Day Fiancé watched in shock as the couple once admired for their love became the center of scandal. Outside the courthouse, cameras surrounded Jenny. She could barely lift her head, overwhelmed by humiliation and heartbreak. When the judge delivered the verdict, the room went silent. Sumit Singh was sentenced to 6 months in prison. The decision crushed Jenny. She had endured family rejection, cultural conflict, and endless criticism for him. But this betrayal was different. It was something love could not repair. As officers led Sumit away, Jenny's world collapsed. The man she had defended so fiercely was now a prisoner, trapped not only by the law, but by his own choices. She wasn't just a victim of his addiction. She was a victim of his lies. Outside, reporters shouted questions. Would she wait for him? Would she stand by him? Jenny had no answers. All she felt was betrayal and the painful realization that her fairy tale had become a public tragedy. When the prison doors closed, Sumit's life changed forever. 6 months behind bars stripped him of freedom and the future he once promised. For Sumit, prison was a harsh reality check. The thrill of gambling was gone, replaced by regret and silence. He was no longer the charming husband seen on television. He was now an inmate defined by his mistakes. Jenny faced her own prison. With Sumit behind bars, she was left alone to deal with creditors, media attention, and public judgment. Friends who once admired her courage now pitied her. Family urged her to return home, but she stayed in India, torn between love and despair. Each prison visit was painful. Sitting across from Sumit, separated by glass, she listened to his apologies and promises. "I'll change," he said. "I'll fix everything." But Jenny no longer believed him. His words felt empty, just echoes of promises already broken. The months passed slowly. Jenny's health suffered under constant stress, sleepless nights, and anxiety. The weight of Sumit's downfall became hers to carry. For Sumit, prison brought reflection, but regret could not erase the debt or heal the damage he caused. When Sumit entered prison, Jenny entered her own private hell. 6 months of loneliness, humiliation, and pressure pushed her to the edge. By the time his sentence neared its end, Jenny was no longer the woman who once fought the world for love. She was exhausted, broken, and desperate for peace. Every day, she carried the weight of his betrayal. Neighbors whispered. Family judged. Friends pitied her. The woman once admired for her courage was now seen as a victim of deception as Sumit's release date approached. Jenny felt no relief, only dread. The woman who once believed love could overcome anything now questioned whether love had ever truly existed. The silence during her days grew heavier, and the nights felt endless. Every memory of their early romance now felt distant, almost unreal, like it belonged to someone else's life. When Sumit was finally released from prison, there was no celebration, no reunion filled with tears and joy. Instead, there was awkward silence and emotional distance. He returned to Jenny with apologies, promises, and plans for a fresh start. He claimed prison had changed him. He said he understood the pain he had caused. He begged for another chance. Jenny listened, but her heart remained guarded. Too many promises had already been broken. Too many sacrifices had gone unrecognized. She had spent months alone carrying the shame, the debt, and the public judgment while Sumit faced the consequences of his own actions behind bars. Life after prison was far from easy. The debt still existed. Creditors continued to demand payment. Legal fees added to the pressure. Sumit struggled to find work, his reputation permanently damaged. The future he spoke of rebuilding felt empty and unrealistic. Jenny tried to hold on. She wanted to believe change was possible. But trust, once shattered, does not heal easily. Every conversation felt heavy. Every disagreement reopened old wounds. The love that once burned brightly was now reduced to exhaustion and resentment. Arguments became frequent. Jenny accused Sumit of destroying her life. Sumit accused Jenny of abandoning him emotionally. They were no longer partners fighting together. They were two broken people pulling in opposite directions. The final breaking point came quietly. There was no dramatic fight, no shouting, just a moment of clarity. Jenny realized she was no longer fighting for love, but for survival. She had given everything she had. Her savings, her health, her dignity, and still it was not enough. Jenny made the hardest decision of her life. She asked for a divorce. For Sumit, the decision felt like another punishment. He pleaded with her to reconsider. He reminded her of their history, their sacrifices, their vows. But Jenny's heart was already made up. Love should not feel like a prison. Marriage should not feel like fear. The divorce process was painful but necessary. Papers were signed. Assets were divided. What little remained of their shared life was slowly dismantled. When it was over, Jenny felt something she hadn't felt in years. Quiet. There was no happiness at first. Only relief mixed with grief. She mourned not just the marriage, but the future she believed they would have together. The dreams, the promises, the woman she used to be. Jenny eventually left India and returned to the United States. Rebuilding her life was not easy. Financial recovery was slow. Emotionally, she carried deep scars. Therapy became part of her healing process. So did reconnecting with family and old friends who welcomed her back with open arms. Public opinion was divided. Some fans supported her, praising her strength for finally walking away. Others criticized her choices, questioning why she stayed so long. Jenny learned to tune out the noise. She had lived through the truth. No one else had the right to judge her pain. Time passed. Slowly, Jenny began to rediscover herself. She focused on her health. She found comfort in routine. She learned how to enjoy silence without fear. The woman who once defined herself through sacrifice now began to value peace. It was during this period of rebuilding that Jenny met Zach. Zach was nothing like Sumit. He was calm, steady, and emotionally present. He listened without interrupting. He didn't ask her to prove her love through sacrifice. He didn't bring chaos into her life. He brought safety. Their connection started as friendship. Jenny was cautious, guarded by years of betrayal. She was honest about her past, her fears, and her trauma. Zach didn't rush her. He didn't pressure her. He gave her space to heal. Over time, trust slowly returned. Jenny found herself smiling again, laughing without guilt. For the first time in years, love didn't feel heavy. It felt gentle. Their relationship was private. Jenny didn't rush to share it publicly. She had learned the cost of living her life in the spotlight. This time, she chose peace over attention. As Jenny moved forward, Sumit faded into the past. His attempts to reconnect were met with silence, not out of anger, but out of closure. Jenny had forgiven him, not for his sake, but for her own. Looking back, Jenny now sees her journey clearly. What once felt like love was mixed with manipulation, secrecy, and fear. She understands now that loving someone should never mean losing yourself. Her story became a warning and a lesson. Love alone is not enough. Trust matters. Honesty matters. And no relationship is worth sacrificing your safety, stability, or self-respect. Jenny Slatton's story did not end with scandal or prison walls. It continued with strength, growth, and the courage to start over. She survived betrayal, public humiliation, and emotional devastation. And in doing so, she reclaimed her life. What began as a fairy tale turned into a nightmare, but from the ruins, Jenny built something real. Not a perfect ending, but an honest one. A life defined not by pain, but by the choice to heal. And sometimes that choice is the bravest love story of all. Years after the divorce, Jenny often reflected on how much her life had changed, not in dramatic, cinematic ways, but in quiet, meaningful ones. Healing, she learned, was rarely loud. It didn't arrive with fireworks or grand declarations. It came slowly, disguised as ordinary days that no longer felt heavy. She settled into a modest apartment in a small American town, far from cameras, gossip, and expectations. Mornings began with coffee on the porch, watching sunlight creep across the street. Evenings ended with books, soft music, or long walks where her thoughts no longer spiraled into fear. For the first time in decades, her nervous system rested. Zach became a steady presence in her life, not as a savior, but as a partner who respected her independence. He understood her need for space. Some days she wanted closeness, other days she needed silence. He never took it personally. That alone felt revolutionary. They talked openly about boundaries, something Jenny had never been allowed to have before. There were no ultimatums, no emotional manipulation, no fear of punishment for honesty. Disagreements existed, but they didn't escalate into emotional warfare. Problems were addressed, not weaponized. Jenny often found herself surprised by how love could feel so uneventful. No chaos, no dramatic highs followed by crushing lows, just consistency. And at first, that consistency felt unfamiliar, almost suspicious. Her body had been conditioned to expect pain. Calm felt foreign. Therapy helped her untangle that confusion. Session by session, she unpacked years of emotional conditioning. The belief that love required sacrifice, endurance, and suffering. She learned to recognize red flags she once ignored. She learned that stability was not boredom, and peace was not emptiness. There were setbacks, Certain sounds, phrases, or memories could still pull her backward. News stories about betrayal or public humiliation sometimes reopened old wounds. On those days, Jenny allowed herself to feel without judgment. Healing, she realized, didn't mean forgetting. It meant remembering without losing herself. Occasionally, fans still recognized her. Some approached with kindness, thanking her for sharing her story. Others asked intrusive questions, searching for drama that no longer existed. Jenny handled it with grace. She no longer felt the need to defend herself. Her life was no longer a performance.